Every year on a Sunday following spring's first full moon, people all over the world celebrate the holiday of Easter with colored eggs and tales of magical rabbits. A Christian holiday, Easter celebrates the resurrection of Jesus Christ as told in the New Testament and is one of the holiest days in the Christian calendar. If I'm being honest, Easter's always perplexed me. I would hear the stories in church, and then I would go home and dye eggs and receive an Easter basket that was dropped off by a magical rabbit, and I had a hard time putting these pieces together in my mind. I was accused of overthinking it and told to not worry about it, just enjoy the holiday. But me being me, I could not just let it be, so I decided to investigate. And in learning about where these traditions come from, I am inspired by our shared humanity, because these traditions are ancient and elements of them cross cultures and go deep into our collective past. So I think they're worth learning, and I think they're worth celebrating. So come join me and hear the story of Easter, and stick around when I dye some eggs with some natural dyes, make some leaf prints, take part in the ancient rites of spring. And if you're into learning about nature and where nature and culture meet, please subscribe and hang out in the Green Dream City, where Cece and I are sharing our passion for nature and the story of us building our urban homestead here in New York City. Easter, also known as Pascha or Resurrection Sunday, I think it's good to look at this date. And why is Easter connected to a full moon and the spring equinox? In the early days of Christianity, this was a really controversial topic. So if we look at the story of Easter, we know that on the Last Supper, the Thursday before Jesus died on Good Friday, Jesus and the apostles gathered to celebrate Passover with a Seder meal. And Passover always falls on full moon. The first Christians were Jews, and it made sense to them to follow the Hebrew lunar solar calendar, and the date of Easter was always related to the date of Passover. As time went on, some leaders in the church resented having to consult the Jews and the Jewish calendar, and at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, it was ruled that it would be determined only by the church. It was not going to be connected to a Jewish holiday, but it still must fall after a full moon and in spring. Honestly, the whole thing was really controversial, and I think it's just a terrific example of human folly and getting lost in the details, because over the simple idea of what day to celebrate Easter resulted in excommunications from the church and even executions. Why get so hung up on a day when what's really important is the history and values that you're trying to celebrate? What I think is sometimes lost about Easter is how much is connected to the Jewish holiday of Passover. Another word for Easter is Pascha, which comes from the Hebrew word Pesach, meaning Passover. Both Pesach and Pascha take place in spring and entail a shared meal with family, celebrating the rebirth of hope in this season. For Jews, it is also honoring the story of the escape of their ancestors from enslavement in Egypt. And both Easter and Passover will incorporate the imagery of the egg. At the Passover meal, there is a hard-boiled egg, and the roundness represents the cycle of life, and also, as it is dipped in salted water, the tears of the ancestors. The inclusion of eggs in service of a religious practice predates Christianity and Judaism. In fact, painted eggs were discovered in ancient tombs in Africa from over 65,000 years ago, amazingly. Theological concepts of a cosmic egg from which the universe was born occur across cultures, symbolic of the cycle of life and death, And eggs are very prominent in folklore as well as folk magic. It is no surprise that an earth that is finally stirring and blooming after the long winter into spring would call up for us this imagery of the egg in our collective unconscious. It's notable that painted eggs are also featured in the Persian New Year's and spring festival called Nowruz, where families also gather for a meal, and there will be what's called the half-seen table, which when I first saw it, I was honestly taken aback because at a quick glance, it looked like an Easter table. You would see symbolism of early spring flowers, the painted eggs. Nowruz, now mostly a secular tradition, has its roots in Zoroastrianism, a monotheistic religion that is one of the oldest continuously practiced religions in the world, which predates Christianity and Judaism, and in fact its monotheism likely inspired the advent of these religions. The origin of Easter eggs is frequently tied to the Christians of Mesopotamia who would dye the paschal egg from Passover red in honor of Christ's blood at the crucifixion. One can't help but wonder if there was some inspiration from the Nowruz celebrations of the Zoroastrians that were also in Mesopotamia in ancient times. But what about the Easter Bunny, Muggsy? Well, the Easter Bunny burrows its way into the popular imagination by way of German folklore. Turns out the Easter Bunny was a figure somewhat similar to Santa Claus in that he would examine the behavior of children during the Lent season, which is the period of time preceding Easter, and he would determine who he was going to give his colored eggs, which were considered a treat, and his candies to. Eggs were forbidden during Lent, so Easter was seen as a time where people could really chow down on eggs. It was considered a special time. And this character of the Easter Bunny, also called Osterhase, was a popular figure in German folklore. There's a controversial question of whether the Easter Bunny, Osterhase, is linked to a Germanic spring goddess of the dawn, Oester, also called Ostara. Please forgive me if my pronunciations are incorrect, from which the holiday Easter gets its name. Our first written records that we have of a Germanic spring goddess named Oester come to us from Saint Bede in the 8th century, who was a church historian. He stated that the Germanic Jostermonat, which was the German word for April, was a time when people would hold festivals in her honor. This goddess was also famously written about by German philologist and folklorist Jacob Grimm, one half of the Brothers Grimm, who took Bede at his word and went on to study the etymology of the holiday, saying that Easter gets its name from this spring goddess. Then in 1845, linguist and philologist Adolf Holtzmann reports, "The Easter hare is inexplicable to me, but it must be linked to the goddess Ostara." Whether Bede, Grimm, and Holtzmann are correct about this ancient goddess of spring, the story took on a life of its own after that, and it became essentially a modern folktale. There are different versions of the story which hold that the goddess of spring transformed a bird into the Easter Bunny, and that he lays eggs in honor of his former life. While these stories might not be very ancient, they are definitely charming, and they've taken on a lot of hold in the popular imagination. The imagery of the rabbit is very ancient and definitely goes across cultures as well. It was believed in ancient times by some that rabbits were intersexed and could breed with themselves because they had male and female parts, and that is accounting for their fertile nature. Rabbits are known for their ability to have many babies, and so they are symbols of fertility. It definitely makes sense that they would be a symbol of this time when the earth is growing in its abundance. Other aspects of our traditional cultural Easter practices connect us to other springtime traditions across the world. For example, it is very common to take part in a spring cleaning, and that is a very popular idea. In Thailand, for example, springtime is also considered the new year, and it is a huge festival of cleansing called Songkran, where people will spray each other with water in the streets and will cleanse their statues. Of course, they also clean their whole houses. So this idea of rebirth, of starting fresh, it is a natural idea that honestly just makes a lot of sense and feels good, so people do it. This is a time after a long winter when suddenly flowers are abundant, and this is a symbol that you see of springtime everywhere. When you look at the Noru's table, you're likely to see hyacinths or tulips or daffodils, and it took me aback because that's what I'm used to seeing in my Easter celebrations. Other common Easter flowers are the Easter lilies. But everywhere you'll see people proudly displaying flowers and also bright colors and pastels to celebrate this floral rebirth. Humans like to get together and acknowledge the beauty in our lives, what we have to be grateful for, and symbols that make sense to us on an intuitive level help us to convey this idea and seize the moment. I think that's a beautiful thing, and I think spring and all of these connected holidays, cultural takes on the season are all lovely, and I hope that everyone has a happy spring, a happy Easter, a happy Passover, a happy Nowruz, a happy Songkran, a happy New Year, a happy full moon, all of the beautiful and abundant things for you as we head into spring. And please enjoy dyeing eggs with natural dyes. So I made a red, yellow, and blue and was able to mix these colors up. First was purple cabbage, and then some skins of yellow onions. Boil these up for about 30 minutes. I also boiled up some turmeric to make it yellow. Add some white vinegar and strain out everything after you've boiled it up. To make a green color, I mixed turmeric with the cabbage. Now, if you want to get really fancy and make a leaf print, just take some pantyhose and cut them. And you can use this to hold leaves in place. So before you put your eggs in the dye, just make a design. And then with your eggs, you're going to leave them to sit for a while, at least 20 minutes or so. And then you'll get these nice, beautiful colors.